So the chaplain general suddenly, about a month before Remembrance Day, issues this directive that padres are no longer allowed to include prayer, as we understand prayer, from a Judeo-Christian perspective, as well as Muslim and Jewish rabbis. Muslim imams and Jewish rabbis as well are included in all of this. That there was to be no reference to God, no reference to Holy Father, anything along that line. And it was sort of just right in time for Remembrance Day, when I don't think I've ever been to a major military event where the padre doesn't stand up and make some sort of prayer.
Hey folks, another episode of the Hard to Kill podcast, and I'm sitting with Catherine Christensen. And today we're chatting about another issue plaguing the Canadian Armed Forces. This time it's all about religion and where it stands right now within the forces. Because if you're tracking, there's been some news reports about the Remembrance Day ceremonies and there being no reference to God in these ceremonies. Now, I'm just mildly aware of what's going on, but I wanted to have Catherine on because obviously religion is a very important aspect of who we are as people and is part of the military culture. And it's a pleasure to have Catherine on again. So Catherine, let's start with what's going on now. It seems like the Canadian Armed Forces can't catch a break. They just keep on making mistakes and people are getting pissy, and folks like yourself are holding them to account. So what's this whole issue with the prayer within the Canadian Armed Forces and what's going on there?
Right. Well, they even caught the attention of the House of Commons, because within a couple of days of this breaking, it was brought up in the House of Commons as well. So what happened is the chaplain general issued a directive, which is not an order, but it's so my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but my understanding is an order is we will take that hill. A directive is this is how we're going to take the and the directive is how we will take that hill. Okay. So the chaplain general suddenly, about a month before Remembrance Day, issues this directive that padres are no longer allowed to include prayer, as we understand prayer, from a Judeo-Christian perspective, as well as Muslim and Jewish rabbis. Muslim imams and Jewish rabbis as well are included in all of this. That there was to be no reference to God, no reference to Holy Father, anything along that line. And it was sort of just right in time for Remembrance Day, when I don't think I've ever been to a major military event where the padre doesn't stand up and make some sort of prayer, what dinner, whatever, gala, they do it. And and it's not just the words that they removed. They also have banned padres from wearing their sash that they wear over their uniform, that usually has their religious symbol on it, a cross, the Star of David, a crescent moon for the Muslim imams. So they're not even allowed to have that symbol on their uniforms. So, I mean, that's a big switch, and it hit a real button with people, that they would decide that this big part of military culture, they can't do anything in public. So then that leads to a question of what if they're not allowed to do that in public. We then have a question of, can they give last rites? Can they conduct a funeral? Can they, lead any type of public thing? So we have that going on, and then the bishop comes out with a statement that was really rather weak. I expected the bishop to come out swinging to say, hold on a minute, what are you doing? But the bishop's take on it was that padres were not going to be allowed to do anything religious outside of the walls of their temple, church, whatever. And that's a big attack on the Padres' role in the Canadian Armed
Mm-hmm.
Forces,
Mm-hmm.
because not only do they offer religious services, but they also counsel families. They go out
Mm-hmm.
to help families. In my family law practice, when I was doing that, many times if there was a big issue, we went to the Padre to get help, because they are the conscience of the Canadian
Right.
Armed Forces, is how I've had them describe their role. Their role is to go, because they're outside the chain of command. So if the CO is doing something that probably isn't good for the morale, et cetera, of the troops, it's the Padre's job to walk into his office and say, hold on a minute, think about this. You know, he's Jiminy Cricket on the CO's shoulder,
Right.
basically, he or she.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it's been interpreted as is the Canadian Armed Forces moving away from having that role as a Padre. So what's the point of having Padres if you take away their major role?
Well, yeah, it's like taking
So,
an infantry soldier's like weapon away. It's like, oh
yeah.
no, you're still an infantry soldier, but I don't have any weapons. Yeah, well, it's still the same job. We didn't change anything about it. We just can't do the shooting thing anymore. Which
Yeah.
I just have I have a sinking, ugly suspicion about where this is going, because eviscerating your ability to have any sort of connection with spirituality forces you into a really ugly type bind that we've seen before in the 20th century, where they strip away your ability to pray because we're just being inclusive. We want everything to be the same. And this is where communism goes. And I don't want to be like a conspiracy theorist, but this is not good. I never took offense that in my earlier years, when I was in my 20s, I really was agnostic. I wasn't religious. I left, if you want to say it, left my faith, but I still went to the church ceremonies. I still participated. I still talked to the Padre. I recognized that it was an important aspect of who we were. And it wasn't like the Jewish or the Muslim guys didn't go talk to the Padre because he had a Christian cross on him. He was just a listening ear to issues that needed to be brought up. Just like you said, it's a main line to the CO, where when you're a private, you just don't have a main line to the CO. And there's a reason for that. And that makes sense. If enough guys go to the Padre and there's an issue, the CO typically listens. And that's the beauty of it. And there's no religious stuff going on in his office. It's not like he's trying to baptize you and like convert you. That's not it. And the soul, you're right, there's a soul of the military, because it's blood and guts and death and a lot of praying that you're not going to die in a lot of scenarios.
As they say, there's no atheists in foxholes.
Right. Because it's your come
right?
come to God moment, come to Jesus moment, whatever you say in other religions. You've got bullets going overhead. You're like, oh shit, I either made some bad decisions and I don't know if I'm going to get out of here or not, but somebody protect me. And
I hope there's a higher power watching my back.
Really, yeah. Like Homer Simpson would say, like, Jesus a la Buddha, like, please come save me. Anyone that's out there right now, please, I need this help. Exactly. I want to go back to the directive versus order jargon that we're talking about here. And you mentioned an order's go take that hill. Got it, sir. I'm taking it. And then the directive, because is not the same. It's like how we're going to do things. But this came up during your other lawsuit with the individuals that were forced to leave the forces due to the fact that they didn't want to comply with the COVID mandates, because it was a directive that came down, but everybody acted as if it was an order. Why is the Canadian Forces going down the route of a directive rather than issuing an order that all Padres must do the following? Well, from your point of view.
Yeah, I think it's so that they can circumvent the court-martial process, because then they don't need to charge anyone with anything. They can do administrative measures, which is more in their control, is my take on it. And really, this is part of my argument in the bigger lawsuit. If a directive is interpreted as an order and carried out as an order, it's become an order, no matter what the title says on the top of the page. Because certainly that's how, with the COVID-19 directives, that's how they were interpreted. People were told, you've been given an order, follow it. So if they didn't mean for it to be an order, it got interpreted that way, which means that's how it's going to be treated in court. we're going to be doing that. The other part of that is that I had a lot of feedback from my clients when this whole prayer thing came in. And there were some that legitimately pointed out that the Padres being affected by it now are the ones who wouldn't stand up for them when they asked for religious exemptions, the ones that were, the ones, some of them did go to the COs and say, yeah, no, their sincere beliefs, etc., and then were overruled. But where was Padres? Where were they to stand up? Where was the chaplain general to stand up and say, no, people's religious rights? Because he's in the directive, and the bishop as well, they're citing all this religious freedom stuff. But they weren't there 2 years ago when everybody needed them to be there to stand up and say, why wasn't the chaplain general at those high level meetings saying, no, people's religious, you can't touch people's religious faith or whatever beliefs they have. Those are off the table. And now it's kind of like the World War II saying of, they came for the Jews, etc. And then when they came for me, there was nobody to fight for me.
I have it here, actually. I'll read it out. It's first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a Methodist minister, I believe. So, and so the other point of this, Dave, is our national anthem has God in it. So does this mean a Padre can't sing the national anthem?
Ooh, that's a sticky one.
Because he's not allowed to say the word God in public.
Okay, Catherine, doesn't this infringe on? Doesn't this fundamentally infringe on the charter?
Yes. Yes, it does.
So how can any organization? Is it just because there's not enough pushback and they've been getting away with it for so long, and they go, we can do whatever the hell we want. Nobody pays attention. Right. It's Canada. Is that essentially what we're dealing with here? I can make a directive. I'm the CDS. I'll make a directive, and you can suck. And that's the attitude that exists.
Just go ahead and grieve it. I'm the final authority, so I'll just say, yeah, it's reasonable. That's kind of what this comes down to. So through public pressure, MPs talking about it in the House, the chaplain general cracked just a little because he has now said that they are allowed to pray at Remembrance Day this year.
Why not every year? I don't understand why would you.
Why not every? Well, how about the Christmas mess dinners coming up, etc.
So this is something I've always harped on, when, especially being a leader, and then even when I got into teaching, and it relates to being a parent. You don't make a hard line in the sand unless you're willing to back it up and enforce it. Because you're just going to create bureaucracy, and then you have to keep track of everything. So in this case, and especially don't make a rule if you can't enforce it, because then it's going to erode morale and discipline, because you're going to realize, well, this rule doesn't actually, it is not real. So all the other things you might come up with, we're going to say, I don't know about this one either. Because if this is one thing, and let's say I have a very strong feeling, because I know some Padres, especially in the reserve units, they're going to get up and say prayers. They're just going to get up and say prayers. So therefore, they're contravening a directive, not an order, as an officer in, His Majesty's military. What precedent is that now setting for the entire military, for Padres that are just clearly defying directives?
Well, and it's interesting because in the directive, it says that if they do this, they will be removed from the Padre trade.
No.
Oh, yes, that directive says that. If they do this, they will be removed from the Padre trade. So that's their punishment. And
so they'll lose their title but still remain in the forces.
I had that happen with the COVID-19 mandate as well. We had one in particular, Padre stood up to them and refused, and they took away his trade. He's an infantry officer now.
Wait, hold on. Let's back it up. He was an infantry officer. He was an infantry officer qualified before he became a Padre. So then he was able to fall back to his infantry officer.
he had one more year left to absolutely complete his Padre training. He was there, and because he wouldn't follow the mandate, they took away. He's not a Padre anymore.
But he's still in the forces as an infantry officer. This is Okay, stories like this need to be turned into movies. This is an incredible story.
I could write 10 books, Dave, with some of the stuff I'm seeing coming out of the cat.
Man.
It's because they've never been held to account. You know?
This is wild. Okay, so Remembrance Day is fast approaching. This is going to be released.
So they cracked under the pressure. They want to take the pressure off for the media over Remembrance Day, but it's still in place.
Okay, so I'm gonna call it. There's going to be some chaplains that are going to get up and they're going to straight up mention God during Remembrance Day, whether it's here in Montreal. And I bet I'm putting money on it. There's going to be some French Padres that are going to go straight for the jugular because they're going to be like, "Oh, j'ai pas compris." They're going to just like say, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you don't tell me what to do." And then what are they going to do? What are they going to do if it's on national TV when they have the actual Padres get up and they start talking and they start doing their prayers and it's broadcast? Then what is the CDS going to publicly
get rid of all the Padres? Maybe that's the goal. But there's also Padres voting with their feet. The morale in the Padre Corps is very, very low right now. And they're like, if you won't allow me to practice my religion, you won't allow me to talk about God, or even they're not even allowed to wear the sash that they wear over top of their uniform that identifies them as a Padre in the crowd. They're coming. They're coming for the Padres. They came for everybody else. Now they're coming for the Padres. This will clearly identify the Padres that aren't going to follow, the agnostic or atheist mindset.
Yeah, I think that as much as I like to make myself feel comfortable that all of this is incompetence, because it does make me feel comfortable when I think this is just pure incompetence. People that don't know what they're doing, they're just following blindly and stumbling through this. It can't just constantly be incompetence, because incompetence eventually runs its course, because people right the ship when it's incompetence, because typically people step up and fix things. But maybe I'm completely wrong on this. But how do we keep on, or I say we, because I'm identifying as part of the biggest, like the big forces kind of like machine, whatever you want to call it. But how does this keep on happening? I'd like to hear your opinion on that. Is there some kind of plan to just eviscerate the forces? Because it seems like the last like nail in the coffin. Like, okay, let's just strip all of this out and then just make it this big homogenized blob of uselessness. Is that, because that's what I see, and that's what a lot of my buddies see.
I actually agree with you. I think it is an attempt to completely rejig our forces, and in the process, it's completely destroyed it. Air gets to go down in history, in my opinion, as the CDS that destroyed the Canadian Armed Forces. The forces that we're going to celebrate on November 11th and remember for all the stuff they've done. I mean, there was a saying, I believe, that was if the ideal army would be U.S. weapons, was it UK officers, but Canadian troops.
Canadian troops, yeah.
Because of how hard they would fight. And that hasn't happened. And I mean, we have people now deployed to the Middle East in the middle of that chaos. You can bet there's a chaplain with them to help them deal with everything that they're seeing.
Yeah, that's for sure.
To say you talk about morale of the troops, trying to get people to join, and then you strip probably the frontline person who's there to help these troops pick up the pieces after a horrific event. It's not social workers, it's not psychologists, it's the Padre. That's the person in the tent next to you that's going to try and help you sort through, what was happening around you. And now they're saying, well, we're going to turn them into social workers now because they're not allowed to use religion.
Right. What was the issue I saw that you raised on X where the minister was caught in a lie. What was going on there?
So after the story broke and the directive became public, Bill Blair got on X and said, "That's not true. They can pray on Remembrance Day. The conservatives are spreading misinformation." And it was like, you haven't read the directive that came out of the Chaplain General's office, because it very definitely said that prayer was gone. Any reference to God was gone. Yeah. So it was like, you're a liar, and I have the directive to prove it. So, and then out came the statement from the bishop, who actually outranks the chaplain general, by the way, basically agreeing that that's exactly what it said, and saying that they don't agree and that they should back down. It was a strongly worded letter type of argument, but not. I saw it as weak. I really did expect much more pushback from the bishop to say, "Hey, come on, this isn't going to fly." But
okay. So is this the bishop? Like, I'm not clear on the organizational structure here. Is that the bishop for the forces, or is this the bishop for Canada? Like, how does that work?
So there's a committee, the ICCM. I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but so it's a committee that deals with religious bodies within the CAF. And so they're the ones that should have determined this. This should not have been a directive coming from the chaplain general. He should have consulted that committee first and got approval before he did what he did. But he just went ahead and did it. So we're seeing the same actions from senior top command that we saw 2 years ago. Well, this is coming from somewhere that we're supposed to make this happen, so make it happen. And be damned of how things are supposed to work.
Okay. So that begs the question. I mean, this came down from the ministerial level, but who made the actual decision to go ahead with this? Like, it seems like the chaplain general got orders to do it, but did it come from the minister, or did it come from the PM? Did it come from somebody else? Is that still kind of...
So, well, the chaplain general probably got the order from the CDS. That would be the person who would have the rank to give him an order to do it. Where he got his order from, well, we've got the same question we have from 2 years ago. It better have been the governor general or the king.
Or the king, yeah.
If it's coming from the minister or the prime minister's office, you got a problem. But to me, this just all fits into the same agenda.
Yeah, this whole idea that it does really seem, and the last video that I posted, I got a great quote from Jordan Peterson on just the crumbling of the institutions, and there's this like baked in narcissism at the very top that this is what I'm going to do regardless of what anybody says, because it's my way or the highway. And I'm talking about Prime Minister Trudeau, that all the signs are pointing to you're doing a terrible job and you're not holding the country together, which is your primary role. All the other nitty gritty stuff within the departments is actually it's not supposed to be your thing. That's how I understand what the prime minister is supposed to do. You're just supposed to keep the federation together, but you're doing the exact opposite. And if that's the case and you constantly do it, what's your motivation? And I don't think we know exactly, because it's hard to know exactly what somebody's motivations are, but like, people are fed up. And if he's the one that it's found out is giving orders, I'm still baffled by what the implications are for that for our country. That the prime minister, who does not have the authority to give orders to his ministers like the CDS, and the CDS would follow it, like I said in that original video, that's a silent coup. Is it not? Because then he's usurping the authority from the king and the rightful authority, which I don't think should exist. In my opinion, I'm a Republican, but it's still it's still what we have in place right now. So we have to abide by those rules, because if we don't, then we're just lawless, right? And we don't have the rule of law.
Right. Like if that's the system of government that is being pursued, then that needs to be put to the people.
Yes.
The people should decide who's the head of our government, whether it's the king or it's going to become a prime minister or a president. That isn't supposed to be done just because they happen to have power right now. So they're going to change it all. But we're seeing more and more coming out about this government, and some of the agenda behind it. That's mind-boggling to me. I mean, I was graduating high school at the end of Trudeau 1.0, and what happened here in Alberta with that crumbling economy, etc. And I look at this now and think this is even worse. I mean, we thought that was as bad as it could get, but we're
Yeah.
seeing it. And interestingly enough, I think part of it is they honestly can't see the damage being done to the forces. And the Liberals have never cared about military. That's the last big decade of darkness in the 90s was under Christensen with the Liberals, where they gutted the military then, and they're headed in that same direction now.
And it originally started with Trudeau 1.0 too, with the unification, right? So that put us, in my opinion, that was the start of the end, and that's just my opinion from having read like Grant Stein and stuff like that, who has a really good perspective on things. You can't do what you did to the forces and kind of bureaucratize it and then expect it to be like a modern fighting force. It just doesn't make any sense. Right. So that was kind of the first step, and then now it's just like little morale hits as we progress to the point where it just seems like the CDS is complicit, even though he made great statements the other day about our capacity to fight. We don't have any. He was kind of like ringing the alarm bell. Hey, we don't have any ammunition. We don't have any troops. This isn't a good thing. But he's also on the other side getting rid of people left, right, and center that won't comply with his directives. And it's just like, well, what side are you on, man? I don't understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, the numbers I'm hearing is we're going to be down to 21,500 by the end of this year, by the end of December. Within the next 8 weeks, we're down to 21,500.
Reg Force or Reg Force and Reserve?
Everybody. That's counting everybody. We don't have enough people to do. Yeah, that's why on X I made the comment of we don't have enough people to handle an ice storm in Quebec this winter, let alone fight any wars.
21,000. I'm pretty sure Moldova has more than that.
Yeah, well, I've heard an interesting comparison that the city of New York has a bigger police force than we have a military.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's not good. And then it's everything's inertia, right? Now that a lot of inertia builds up in your system, because how are you going to get things rolling again to get people back in? It's almost, once the system slows, it's almost impossible to get it back up again.
You don't have people to train them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've been talking about this before. I'm waiting for the phone call because I could see in the relatively near future, because I've seen it in the past where we had to train so many, we didn't have enough because we're on a war footing. So people were joining like crazy. We didn't have enough. So I remember there was like old Van Du warrants doing weapons training. And I thought that was interesting. Like I said, well, yeah, we don't have the personnel on the ground. We're either deployed, we're training, or we're in some kind of rotation. So yeah, that makes sense. But in this case, we have nobody. So we're going to need somebody to come back in. I probably would. I loved it. So, okay, cool. But the context is going to be really weird. And that's where a lot of us, especially in the veteran world, have some apprehensions, right? Like, what are we actually doing here? What's the mission? Like, if I get involved, what do you want me to actually do? Because the big why needs to be attached to it. Because if we don't have a why anymore, I'm not going to commit time, effort, and train the next generation if there's no real reason, and we're just training them for the sake of training them because we're now panicking that somehow we need to bolster their forces again. Like that's not the right reason. So the
veterans aren't going to join back in uniform either. They're going to come back as private contractors.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not putting on. Are you crazy? Are you crazy? I would put a uniform back on. Are you crazy? No way. Are you crazy?
I'm hearing that. I've heard that from thousands now.
No way. Yeah, pay me those private contractor bucks if you're going to pay me for sure. Yeah, no, I'm not doing the uniform thing anymore. I'm too comfortable in my ways. But so Catherine, where's this going in your opinion? Like, obviously you're involved on the legal side of things. So like, what are the next steps, and what do you expect to happen in the future?
For this incident, I think they're going to try and bury it and see if they can keep getting away with it. I think it's going to cost them a lot of chaplains. It's going to be very interesting for me deposing the chaplain general, who is a defendant in 2 lawsuits for abuse of power. And I can't wait to ask him some questions under oath about what he's done. I wonder if he'll swear to God or just affirm.
Oh my god! He'd be disobeying his own directive.
He'd be disobeying his own directive. Did I just hear
Man,
you swear to God in a public place, General?
that's a Gordian knot right now. How do you get out of that? Oh man.
These are I enjoy doing depositions because I like calling people out on stuff like that, and they're forced to answer me, because in deposition I can sit there for 5 days waiting for an answer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Very interesting.
So yeah, no, it's going to be interesting because they are gutting the soul of the military now. That's the next target, and it's the chaplains need to stand up and push back. If they don't push back, they're gone. They're going to be eaten up by the machine.
Yeah, they're toast. And I think you're right. The COVID stuff didn't really bring visceral response from the general Canadian public. They're an order's an order. They got to follow orders. That's kind of the general sentiment I got. But this, because it touches on religion, is a very sensitive spot for most. Because as far as I know, most Canadians are still consider themselves religious in some capacity or another. So when you start infringing on that, you start going, wait a second, hold on, you can't do that. That's, if I remember my brief training on the charter when I was in school, isn't my religious freedom enshrined in it? So what are they doing? And some are a lot more religious than others, and this is a big no-no. But we all kind of assumed and just take, I guess, for granted that something like Remembrance Day is a sacred moment in our calendar, and that sacredness comes with a seriousness that's underpinned by religion and spirituality. And when you infringe on that,
keep in mind
something.
Keep in mind that most of the people that we are standing at the cenotaph remembering were, dedicated for their religion. They were, dedicated people, and to discount is in some ways it's a memorial service, right? Almost like a funeral every year to remember the fallen, and so that gives it that sacred ritual space. I've heard Jordan Peterson talking about this as well, and that was challenging people's sacred story of our war veterans, and it hit a nerve. It hit a big nerve in Canada.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Peterson on that fact, because it was actually through his lessons and stuff on YouTube and his podcast that made me realize the religious aspect of the human being, and myself, obviously being a human, can't be discounted, can't be dismissed, and has to be part of who you are. And whatever that story is, it needs to be embraced. And then I started realizing he's right, obviously. And if you don't have that as part of your character and who you are, you start seeking out other forms that can replace that religion that touches on, like Nietzsche, and God is dead, and therefore you're going to go out and find something that replaces your God. And so, for me, that was an important lesson, that you'll start but you'll start worshiping false idols, and there's a whole other conversation. But to bring it back to what it means to be a veteran, and to look at Remembrance Day from that sacred moment in time where we lost a lot of folks that sacrificed everything. There is a deep religious component to it, because, like I said earlier, it involves life and death and rebirth. Very religious topics, and I think you're bang on with that. You can't mess with that, because then that touches on the soul of the country, which you start messing with that, and that's where I think this is trying to go. It's like throwing a hand grenade into the underpinnings of who we are as Canadians, and I think that's the issue. It's, for whatever reason, and I don't obviously understand why, but it seems like the intent is to just completely destabilize, so you have no firm platform to be on, and in chaos you can easily be convinced to do things that may not be in your best interest. That's how I see it, but maybe I'm wrong.
They don't even have to remove their headdress anymore for this moment.
Like
speech,
serving members aren't. required to take off their beret or their headdress? Oh, okay. That's
So
interesting.
yeah,
That's
like we're going deep into military traditions.
yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Wow. I didn't.
So
Wow. That's this directive goes deep then, because
it
it's
does.
attacking. It's somebody knows how to attack then the deep psychological attachments we have to this ceremony, and this gives, I guess, more credence to the idea that this has something to do with, if you want to call it communism, socialism, whatever you want to call it. Whenever you start eviscerating the soul of your country and the sacred ceremonies that are there, I that's, just from reading history, that's kind of where I go. And I know other folks are like, yeah, it's 100% where it is. I'm not convinced 100% that that's where it's going, but there's something afoot that doesn't sit well with me, and I don't think most Canadians, this sits well with them either. So, Catherine, thanks for explaining that. It's troubling, and I hope things go the way that you think they're going to go, where this just gets pushed under the rug and kind of fades away, and things go back to quote unquote normal because of the embarrassment it brings to the forces. So I'm hoping that that's the case. But aside from that, are there any other updates with the other lawsuits? I know there's a lot that are going on. The last time we chatted, we're talking about lead exposure, and then there's the COVID mandate lawsuit. So what's going on with those?
So we're in holding pattern. They've now got our first affidavit of documents, which is a 150-page list of our evidence for the COVID, how they treated people after they brought in the mandate, that abuse. The lead one, we're working on gathering more evidence there. And recently has caught the attention that the Military Police Complaints Commission is now investigating one of my files where a military member tried to kill her children and was convicted of attempted murder and 2 counts of arson. And the military police and the Canadian Forces National Investigation Service badly failed the dad and these kids. So that lawsuit is, I would expect maybe it's going to move up on the desk of the Department of Justice, because now the Military Police Commission is a public investigation, but so far they have identified several points where the investigations failed this family and these kids. So
that's a shame.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
And I'm also working on one where another veteran was offered MAID for mental health issues. Yeah.
Another one. So this is over and above what we learned about. It was about a year ago now that we heard. I think it was like 5 or 6.
Yeah. No, this is a young guy for no physical issues at all. And when he called them for help for mental health, they offered him MAID.
Okay.
So
wait.
that has not gone away. That's coming. That's coming back.
in casual discussion with a Canadian Armed Forces veteran. So medically assisted, for those that don't, medically assisted death, is that why it's D? Is that
medical
is that
assistance in dying.
Medical assistance in dying. Okay, got it. Was just offered as a potential solution. Where the way you're formulating it, it seems like the individual wasn't really in crisis, just looking to get sorted out with whatever issues he may have had.
He was headed to crisis, and he got good advice, and he took it to reach out and get some help from Veterans Affairs because he was a veteran. And that was their solution.
Wow. Great way to keep morale sky high here, folks. It's unfortunate too, because you can't keep on saying, well, it's just one caseworker.
It's not one.
There's more than one incident happens. It's clearly something that must have got passed down at some point, or maybe there's a silent cabal that's there. Who knows? But the issue is not going away, and that's really troubling to hear. I know of individuals that they're fine. They weren't in crisis, but the conversation came up that, have you ever thought about medically assisted in dying? And that is just, if my caseworker is great, so I can't complain. But if I were to get a new one and they were hell hath no fury, man. To even insinuate that would be something that I would want to do and have you help me do it is fucking disgusting.
Like, and it infuriates me as well because this kid is a year older than my own son.
Yeah.
He's young. He's got his whole life ahead of him, and that's what they should be supporting.
No kidding. It's funny you mentioned this because I have a business coach in the UK, not military. And we just had a moment to chat about just random things, just to get to know each other. He's like, hey, I got a question. And if it's okay, I'd like to ask you about what's going on in Canada about the MAID stuff with veterans. I said, I was not expecting you to ask that. How'd you hear about that? He goes, oh, it's big news. And I took a moment to kind of consider the implications of that. It's news to a British guy who's not involved with the military, entrepreneur. It was prominent enough in his news feed that other Brits are talking about it. That means a lot of people are talking about it. And that's a massive, massive embarrassment and stain on our country, because for them, that's disgusting. Why would you do that?
It's got a lot of attention in the US as well.
Yeah. And there you go. The US, again, they bring that up because a lot of my clients are American, and because when you see news reports, you go and assume the worst, like the whole country is being overrun by folks that are being offered MAID. Not the case, but the fact that anybody was offered MAID is a really troubling development in our community.
And I mean, it kind of hits again at that soul of the military.
Yeah.
Because chances are these people, when they were serving, were talking to the Padres. Getting help through the Padres. That's a very good possibility. And, maybe they got some advice that helped them, that when Veterans Affairs bureaucrat says, oh, here, do this, they can go, no.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that need fixing, and, talking about the soul of the military and the soul of Canada, there's definitely, I don't know if you want to call it a time for reckoning, but there's definitely a moment where we kind of have to draw a line in the sand and say enough's enough. And that's why I appreciate what you do, because you're holding the line on the legal side, and thank God you're here. Because wow, right time, right place. What they say, sometimes, greatness is thrust upon you. The fact that you're there holding the line for us in the community, I know, I appreciate it, and everybody else greatly appreciates it as well. And, from my perspective, I think I'm the eternal optimist. Everything always eventually turns around in the end, but it's going to take a lot of bloody hard work. So thanks for everything you do, Catherine. And thanks for the update. Much appreciated. And folks, don't forget to train hard, fight easy. And if you like what you're listening to here, don't forget there's no more Canadian news on social media. It's gone. This is it. So if you're hearing it here, it's because this is one of the only places that you're going to hear about it. So make sure to like and subscribe and share widely with your friends and family. And Catherine, thanks again. Much appreciated. And I'll see you folks on the next one. Peace.